Richard Willingham there in Victoria. Rail services in Germany have been restored after a tech issue caused a near nationwide shutdown. The major outage caused commuter chaos around the country and has prompted questions about infrastructure reliability. Deutsche Welle correspondent Arthur Sullivan joins us now from Berlin. Arthur, g'day. So if Germany is known for one thing, it's its technical prowess and everything being on time, what actually happened and why?
Yeah, well, Joe, I think that was once the case when it came to German trains, but I think anyone who's living here for the last probably 10 years would tell you it's definitely not the case with the trains anymore. So this was a really unprecedented level of disruption to Germany's rail network. So trains of all kinds around the country were brought to a halt for around 2 hours between Tuesday night and Wednesday morning. Now, what happened? The technical explanation was that the digital radio system that Germany's rail network, which is known as Deutsche Bahn, uses to communicate information, broke down. So this is an IT system that links train drivers to control centres, sharing, critical information about conditions on the track and so on. It's basically the key component in the entire network, and it's one that would be used by rail networks around the world. Now, why did this critical system suddenly break down? Well, apparently it's due to workers swapping out a component. So the tech outage meant that trains just couldn't move. Now, the problem was relatively easy to fix, and once it was identified, it was fixed quite quickly, within about 2 hours. But the scale of the disruption meant that this was a really, really big deal in a country which in many ways runs on rail. And I think, Joe, the biggest element was the shock factor. I think a lot of people were like, how can Germany's entire rail network just stop working because one thing breaks down? Now, it's not exactly clear how many people were affected, but Germany's rail network usage is at an all-time high. There's around 6 million daily passengers. So the disruption meant that people were left stranded all around the country. So it was a really chaotic event, which has sort of jolted people into looking at the rail network and saying, what's going on?
In really hot events here in Australia, sometimes the train tracks buckle and that causes issues. Europe's going through a heat wave at the moment. I don't know how much that's impacted Germany so far. We keep on hearing about the UK and France. But yeah, this had nothing to do with buckled tracks or anything.
No, it wasn't specifically to do with buckled tracks. This was very much this technical issue to do with this IT system, this digital radio system. Now, tracks, of course, can buckle, and the severe heat wave in Germany and Europe is impacting rail travel. But this specific issue was not connected to that. But at the same time, the heat wave here in Germany, which is pretty severe, it's going to be potentially 40 degrees, even 41 degrees on Saturday or Sunday this weekend. That has led to Deutsche Bahn advising people against travel this weekend. They've actually taken the unprecedented step, perhaps because they're in damage limitation mode because of this other crisis, but also perhaps for safety reasons. They've said that anyone who booked transport on their trains in the last few days can cancel them for free over the next week or so, or certainly over the next 3 to 4 days, especially because of the risks around the high temperatures. So that, and as well as that, there's also some, real concerns that infrastructure could break down. For example, simple things like air conditioning units are under more strain because of the heat. They are more likely to go in these kind of conditions. So I think they'd actually want people not to be in those situations on the trains. There are also risks of fires breaking out on the tracks, increased risks of fires breaking out on the tracks. So, all of these heat wave issues are compounding the existing problems that Deutsche Bahn is having. So I think it's fair to say it's probably not a weekend for train travel or all kinds of travel in Germany and Europe.
Yeah, and Arthur, there was that extraordinary stat from France over the last couple of days that there were 40 deaths, swimming deaths there. Are authorities concerned in Germany with the heat starting to move in there, kind of issuing warnings about swimming as well?
Yeah, there's been all sorts of warnings ahead of the weekend, Joe. So sporting events, outdoor events have been almost exclusively cancelled. Thankfully, there hasn't been quite as many terrible tragedies as what we've seen in France. But hospitals are increasingly under strain, obviously because of the heat wave. Elderly people, young children and so on are perhaps most vulnerable. But there is a general cancellation of certainly sporting events, I think, beyond the most absolutely elite level ones that are taking place. All football has largely been cancelled, any outdoor events. So authorities are taking it very, very seriously. It is potentially going to be a record-breaking weekend in terms of heat this weekend in Berlin. I think the record in Berlin is around 39.3 degrees. That almost certainly looks like it's going to be beaten, and it's going to cross into the 40-degree mark and may well be beaten in several other cities. So there is a lot of concern from the authorities and indeed from the general public about the risks from this heat wave, and they are taking it seriously.
And a lot of the Germans would just be keen on watching the World Cup anyway, although Germany's not going that well, is it? How much intensity is there and passion for the support for the German team at the moment?
Well, Germany did lose last night, obviously, to Ecuador, but they, it is important to say they have qualified for the next round, and indeed as group winners. So they're still, everything is still on course in that sense. In that, Germany is through to the next round and still would fancy their chances. I think last night was a little bit of a jolt to the system in the sense that they probably didn't expect to lose that particular game. It's interesting. Germany's relationship with the World Cup is a somewhat complicated one. Nowadays, at least, Germany has won it 4 times, so they're one of the absolute superpowers of the game. But in the last few years, I think there's been quite a lot of disillusionment across the German football community with the direction that the World Cup has gone, and particularly some of the sort of corporate goals of FIFA and the price gouging that has blatantly gone on. And so I think a lot of Germans are somewhat ambivalent, perhaps, about the World Cup. But I think if Germany continues to advance and they get to a quarter-final or a semi-final, all bets are off. I think people will show their true passion for football then.
Good stuff. Okay, thanks, Arthur. Arthur Sullivan there in Berlin. Now to finance, and here is David Taylor.